Bank of America Chairman and CEO Brian Moynihan has been a leader in bringing private industry together to establish standards for the environmental, social, and governance, working with both the World Economic Forum and with His Royal Highness Prince Charles. It was in that capacity that he was invited to participate in the G7 summit in Cornwall last weekend, and we asked him about what happened there.
His Royal Highness Prince Charles, for years, for 4 decades plus, has been focused on the environment. A few years, and he's had various initiatives with business people and other groups over the years. A couple years ago, a group of us sat with him and talked about how we could get the private sector really, who has to drive this change, aligned. And so he announced in early 2020 the Sustainable Markets Initiative, the SMI. That is 300 CEOs working as a coalition of the willing to help along industry groups, to help share best practices, to help figure out how we can move things faster, to help promote public policy ideas that would be helpful. That SMI group, through the leadership of His Royal Highness, was able to meet with the G7 leaders for an engagement around, the private sector's here. We don't need money. We are ready to move. We're moving fast. But if you did these types of policy implementations, we could move even faster. So I'm the leader of the group. I co-chair His Royal Highness. I had a chance to speak a bit, and then we had an interaction with the 8 or 9 CEOs were there with the G7 leaders to kind of make sure they understood that we're there to help them support to make this transition be a just transition and help it happen.
So I know that you've been heading up the International Business Council for the World Economic Forum. How does this fit with that? Because I know you're coming up with uniform standards. You've got quite a few companies to sign on to that so far. What kind of progress are you making?
So the World Economic Forum, International Business Council, which I've been chairing for the last couple of years with a group of 130 CEOs or so, they adopted a set of metrics, and 90 or so companies have signed up, and we're pushing that through the system, that basically align against the Sustainable Development Goals the UN adopted in 2015, and frankly define stakeholder capitalism. And those, people, place, planet, and prosperity. And so on the environment, which links to this, obviously, it's disclosure, scope 1, 2, 3, and what are you doing about it, things like that. So one of the things we told the G7 leaders is you need convergence of metrics. And the IBC work, led by the big 4 accounting firms, bringing together the work and pushing for convergence with even the groups that support metrics, SASB, GRI, et cetera. The idea is to push to one set of metrics. So we don't have all the work, as I said to the G7 leaders, going into calculating things. We have the work going into actually making the metrics better. And so you have the SEC looking at these metrics, you have the IFRS looking at these metrics, the EU looking at these metrics, and then you have all the unofficial sectors. So the idea is to push the metrics together, get to a standard set of metrics. That's what the IBC did, and that feeds directly into the SMI, because those are the metrics the SMI believes should be adopted by companies around the world to show they're making progress on the SDGs.
Brian, you studied this so carefully, you understand it well. As a practical matter, will we get where we need to go without the governments adopting those metrics? Can the private sector do it on its own?
Well, I think the important thing is the private sector has the money. So if you think about the calculation of what the Sustainable Development Goals cost per annum is about $6 trillion. So charity, is $1 trillion plus a year. It's wonderful. Think about all that money people are giving away to help things, but it's $1 trillion. If you look at all the foundations, and one of the debates in the world is why all these foundations just don't give away all their money tomorrow. Well, that gets you through about a third of a year. Also, if you look at governments are running huge deficits because of the pandemic, they can only do so much. The private sector has trillions of dollars of market cap, trillions of dollars, many trillions of dollars of market cap, many trillions of dollars of balance sheet, but importantly, many trillions of dollars of operating expenses. So how they operate in their company and how they buy services, including electricity and power and things like that, can move markets. And that's why the private sector has to lead it. Innovation, when the private sector leads it, it becomes capitalism. When capitalism has it, it'll keep sustaining itself. And so that's the sort of intellectual thought process. Can the private sector do it on its own? Absolutely not. This is going to take everybody. But I'll use a specific example, David, sustainable aviation fuels. If there's a mandate for 10% in the world, you will then get an instant market that people can build the plants to produce into. It works today. It's going in planes today. But until there's more of a requirement, it becomes, country by country, region by region, very hard. The airlines are in. They're doing it already. And the question is we could create much more stable markets, and then the private sector provide all the financing, all the stuff, because they know the market's going to be there. That's how a policy and a private market can work in tandem to make something happen.
Right. One of the things that the G7 took up over there was that to propose global minimum tax that would have to go to the G20 and then the OECD. It'd have to go through Congress. Have you taken a hard look, I'm sure you have, at what effect that would have on Bank of America and perhaps as important, more important, your customers if it went through?
Well, banks, as you know, David, pay a lot of taxes, so we have very little shelter. So the only reason why our tax rate's not the exact tax rate in a place like the United States has more to do with the investments we make in low and moderate income housing, in sustainable energy, wind, solar, et cetera. That allows to the tax incentives to bring it down. But that's it. We don't have big depreciation, things other companies do. So the banking system is always affected by taxes because they pay a lot of taxes, frankly. And that's the reality. Highest percentage of taxes paid and highest dollar amount in the U.S. The globalization of the 15% is really to try to get out of what goes on in the U.S. and other countries, even within regions, is people bidding using a tax rate, and they're trying to put a floor in. And I think it'll be interesting to see it rolls through other places. There's obviously countries that have used their tax rate to cause development. They're going to be against this. But I think the reality is pick a lowest common denominator so you avoid uneconomic, unproductive activity, i.e. just moving things around for tax purposes, become the way people operate, and focus on productivity and talent in the markets you serve. Final demand markets and things like that for location as opposed to pure tax rate. We'll see how it goes through, but I think our clients are telling us it affects some more than others. Some are for it, against it, but it's like any other tax thing. It has a purpose people understand, but the implications short term could hurt somebody, and they're going to push against it to see where it ends up.